Hello, I'm Cleo Franklin. I'm the founder and CEO of Morningside College's Franklin Leadership Foundation and global consulting business, Franklin Strategic Solutions. I'm also the proud author of a new book just released called Coffee with Cleo. But folks, I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here today to introduce an exciting new partnership with Morningside College. It's called the Franklin Leadership Professional Development Series. This series is really developed with you in mind. As we deal with the challenges of COVID-19 that has brought about a lot of uncertainty, fear, and doubt, we feel that with chaos comes opportunity. And this initiative is that opportunity to share with you by introducing and bringing to you virtually the best minds across the globe to talk to you about issues, challenges, topics that you're concerned with. What do I do when it comes to pursuing a career? How do I professionally network? What are the tips and tricks to be successful in my life? In fact, you're in for a real treat today. Our first session is going to be led by Professor Scott Davies. Scott Davies is one of the best professors who I happen to teach with an MBA marketing class at the University of Houston, downtown, Marilyn, Davis School of Business. He's going to provide a construct for you, a framework, somewhat of a decision tree process that you're going to appreciate because it's going to give you elements to not just improve your life with decision making, but more importantly, how to improve your livelihood as well. I hope you enjoy this discussion with Scott, but more importantly, I hope that you'll find the series and this platform of engagement with business professionals will be enlightening for you to help you not only rise, but soar to the next level. Thank you so much. And on behalf of Morningside, as well as those involved with the Franklin Leadership Foundation, we welcome this opportunity to engage with you. All the best.
I did a lot of contract work for government agencies, things like that for years and years and years, working in computer programming. And the kind of the nasty truth of my career path is that I hate computer programming. I just don't like it. I don't like it from head to tail. I like the front end. I like the ideation. That's a strength of mine. I like coming up with new ideas. But when we get into validation and verification and debugging and all the things that really make up the bulk of your daily work as a computer programmer, I found it draining and it wasn't enjoyable. And which is why this model, this Icky Guy model that I'm about to show you really resonates with me because I feel like most of my career, I was mired in these jobs that I felt like I had technical competency and I had been training my whole life to work these jobs, but I was constantly dreading work, working for the weekend, and I needed to find some kind of intersection of my interests and my passions with my vocation and my training. And that's a really difficult thing to do late in your career. And when Cleo and I talk about Ikigai, I think one source of frustration is that we're both so far along in our careers that it's not too late to apply this model by any means, but it's certainly not the ideal time. The ideal time is now for you. So if you're in college, midway through, or if you're near the end of your college career, or even if you're in high school, it's a great time to start thinking about this Ikigai model. Eventually, I went back to school for an MBA because I thought, hey, if I don't like to write computer programs, computer software, maybe I can manage software engineers and maybe I'll be good at management. And what I learned, again, just all these kind of unfortunate revelations throughout my career, what I learned during my MBA program is that I probably wasn't going to be a great leader either. It really wasn't. Management was not a passion for me. And fortunately, through that program, I met one of my professors, Dr. Len Berry, who became my mentor and my dissertation chair, who encouraged me to go on and earn my PhD. So I've been through all the different stops of grad school. I had a gap in my college career where I went to kind of find myself in Orlando, Florida, of all places, working for Walt Disney World. And of course, I've entered and exited corporate America and the public sector several times throughout my career. So I hope that I can be a pretty strong resource for you in terms of especially failures and learning from them along the way, but also taking this hindsight approach to Ikigai and saying, hey, if I figured this out earlier, maybe my career could be in a different place or a better place, or I could have been happier sooner. So without further ado, I'm going to show you what this model looks like. And I hope that through the chat function, we can start to work through this together in some ways, because I'd like your input so that we can figure out what's difficult about this, what's easiest to apply, what's best to apply right now. What I really like about this, and I hope you're seeing it on your screen now because I'm going to talk through it, but there are a lot of different components here for us to work through. Uh, the Ikigai model is really interesting because I think that, and hopefully you can even see my mouse cursor. If somebody lets me know in the chat if you can see my mouse cursor, that would be very helpful because I can point to different parts of this particular diagram. And I think we spend much of our time. Awesome. Thank you, Alex. He verifies you can see my mouse cursor. I think we spend a lot of time in America focused on what you're good at and what you can be paid for, right? And we get this a lot throughout college. In college, you're really trying to bolster what you're good at so that you can get paid a lot of money for it when you come out of college. And this intersection of what you're good at and what you can be paid for is called your profession, which, as you see, it's just one of the four kind of green leaves of this Ikigai model. And I think that the reason that 10 to 20% of Americans are happy in their career, it seems like a very low number to me, is because we're so zeroed in on this profession component that we start to lose our purpose. So when we don't have passion, mission, vocation incorporated into this model of a life that we've built for ourselves, especially as work days become longer and more difficult, just zeroing in on what you're good at and what you can be paid for is very limiting. And that's where I got into trouble as a software engineer. I was good at it because I grew up with computers. I started programming in an ancient language, Q Basic, when I was probably 7 years old. So I had a lot of training. I put a lot of hours into computer programming. I was good at it, and there was demand in the marketplace. It was something that I could be paid for, but it left me feeling unfulfilled. I knew that something was missing from my life. And ultimately, I found my way to teaching to try to work more toward this orange center square here, this Ikigai here. So let's start to talk through the outer level, the blue outer sections of these circles of the model here. So starting at the top with what you love. And this is really, and I'll briefly flip to the next slide here. We're trying to figure out, how can we work toward that green intersection that said passion? So things that we love and that we're good at. And there are a lot of ways to figure out what you love. One is just to ask you off the top of your head, what do you love? What are you passionate about? What energizes you? And here I just have a few ways that we can, if it's harder for you to articulate the things that you love, there are some tools that you can use. And one of them is journaling. You can do this right on your smartphone. Just as you work through your school day or your work day or a weekend day even, just jot down the activities that you're participating in and make notes about them. Is this something that you anticipated and you were excited about? While you were participating in the activity, did it bring you joy? Did it bring you energy? And then when you were finished with the activity, did it leave you feeling drained or did it leave you feeling energized? And this is a great clue to the things that you love. And don't think about it just in the context of what you think your career should be. Be very broad with this. And I think the more expansive your thinking can be, the more effective the Ikigai model will be for you. So keep a journal, even if what energizes you is cleaning your apartment or your dorm or helping your parents solve a problem. It can be something as simple as that, but these can be clues to the types of things that you love to do. So I encourage you to participate maybe for a week in journaling. And if I had journaled when I was probably 16 years old doing some web design work, I would have realized, hey, all these activities that I do to make money leave me feeling drained. Maybe I shouldn't major in that in college, or maybe I shouldn't pursue a 30-year career in this field if at 16 years old, these things leave me drained, right? That could have been really helpful information for me to have at that age. Another clue to our passion, to the things that we love and that hopefully we can become good at, is a flow state. So if there are activities where you just lose track of time and you're lost in the moment, and you're getting a lot of energy from this activity, time flies, it's a lot of fun for you. That's a flow state, and that's probably another signal that, hey, this is an activity that you love to do. And then finally, there are, and I know Cleo's an advocate of this too, there are a number of personality assessments you can take. One that I recommend is Clifton Strengths Finder. So if you Google Clifton Strengths Finder, I believe you'll find student pricing. It's always somewhere between $10 and $20. But basically, what this assessment gives you, it tells you what your core strengths are. And mine are things like ideation and competition and strategic thinking. And then you can start being very deliberate about applying your strengths to your life and career. And then you start to slowly, day by day, tilt the balance of your work, your school day toward the things that you love. And then you have more overall life satisfaction. So jumping back to the model here, if I ask you in the chat, just kind of off the top of your head, based on the things I've mentioned so far, just list off a couple things that you love to do. Think about this in terms of activities, not things or people necessarily, but what activities do you love to do? And I'm monitoring the chat here, so I'm not going to put anybody on the spot to embarrass them, but it would be helpful if we got some real life live answers as far as what these things are. Good. So Brett mentions reading, talking to people, creative brainstorming. This is good, and already, as someone who's talked about Clifton Strengths Finder at length, I can start to apply some of those strengths to the types of things Brett's talking about. So he's talking about reading, talking to people. So maybe being good at building relationships, being a relator, being interested in learning. Right? These are the types of things that you can love. And you can get very specific with this too. I think if you asked me when I was a child, what are the things that you love to do? I might have mentioned computers, but probably more in the context of playing video games, right? And there's no shame in listing things like that out if you complete your own Icky Guy model. I probably would have listed fiction writing. I loved to write as a child, and I think that if I had been more deliberate about finding a purpose-driven life, I might have taken more steps to move my career in a direction that synced up with that particular passion, with that thing that I love. And I would have put more time into getting good at it. Because I think when I reached my 30s, I started to think to myself, hey, I'd like to get back to writing, but I wasn't good at it. It wasn't a craft that I had honed. It was just something I enjoyed as a child, but I had not invested the time into that activity that I loved. So I didn't quite have this intersection of what I love and what I'm good at. So it wasn't really a passion for me. So starting to try to build that passion in my 30s or in my 40s is much more difficult than if it had it been something that I identified earlier. Now let's move along the circle here counterclockwise. What are some things that you're good at? Just if you can list off in the chat a few things that you're good at. And this is where the computer work would have come in for me. So computer programming, something I would have listed. And the whole key to Icky Guy, and you'll see this as we move through the model, is trying to find linkages between the things you love, the things you're good at, the things you can be paid for, and things that the world needs, instead of just zeroing in on profession, the things you can be paid for, the things you're good at. And I think in your undergrad, you're kind of getting some sprinkling of all these things. You get a little bit of time to explore subjects that aren't related to your major and maybe discover some new things that you love. Even through meeting new people, you can find new passions. But really, we're focused on your technical training. You're going to get good at this field so that you can get paid a lot of money for it. It's very profession driven unless you personally take the initiative to go out and participate with organizations, do some charity work, and you really have to take that on yourself. It's not really ingrained in our US education system. Okay, Brett, thank you for being a good sport here and playing along. So some of the things you're good at are writing, presenting information, and organization. Good. So I think that even here, you can see some linkages between the things you love and the things you're good at. So if you're good at reading, right, learning, processing information, and then you're translating that in a way, right? You're taking that information, digesting it, and then creating output. You're writing and you're presenting information. So it feels to me like you probably already have some built-in passions, which will give you a leg up on other people who, if you're like me, you're kind of a dabbler or a noodler. You love a lot of different things and you have your hands in them a little bit, but you never really take the time to focus and get good at it. And that can leave you disadvantaged when it comes to finding your Icky Guy, finding your life purpose, finding the career that you're going to love for a very long time. Good, thank you. And then next, what can you be paid for? So based on what you've done so far in college, what are some of think more about jobs, but you can break it down as activities. What are some of the things you can be paid for? If you want to drop some in the chat. I don't know how accessible the chat is to everybody. It took me, there's a little chat bubble that you click on and then you can drop some comments in here in the chat and what you can be paid for. So for me, it was always, since I worked through high school, getting paid for web design, I always kind of followed that path. As I became a better programmer, I realized I could get paid more for working on the back end, working on the databases and the systems to communicate with those databases and put the information on the front end of the web page. So I was always kind of thinking about, how can I maximize what I'm good at to make the most money? And that's what led me into that trap of being in a career I didn't find fulfilling. Right. So one of the comments here for what you can be paid for is building relationships. So that's good because I think that that's broad enough that you can find applications probably across all four of the blue areas here. Building relationships, if it's something that energizes you, can certainly be something that you love. As you work at it, as you build more relationships, as you find frameworks to build relationships and take advantage of them in a positive way, you can become very good at that. You can get paid for it in a lot of different contexts, right? So being a connector is a very valuable skill to have. I work in the world of marketing. Being able to build relationships is probably the most critical skill that you can have in sales and marketing. And then finally, let's circle around to what the world needs. So this is the most elusive circle, maybe the most important one. And I think as a marketer, it resonates with me because we think about demand. So what is there demand for in the world? What does the world need? And this is a little bit different than what you can be paid for, because sometimes what the world needs isn't as high paying as some of the other offers that are available to you. So this is where I think a gap year can really come into play. You can learn more about the world. You can learn more about what the world needs. And you can think really big picture here, especially when you're early in your career. But if that becomes too daunting, you can always scale it down. And I don't think many people talk about this in my experience when they talk about Ikigai. It's always this focus on world needs. But I think that this is the most difficult list to make. So if you think about what does Iowa need? What does Western Iowa need? What does my university need? What does my family need? I think those can be really good jumping off points to trying to figure out more about what the world needs. Because one marketing mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs make is that they focus on what they can build. And we call this supply-driven innovation. So basically, let's say it's an invention. I've invented something and then nobody in the world needs or wants it. It's a big marketing problem. It's typically much more effective to start with what does the customer need and then work from that. And I think the Icky Guy model is the same way. So if you look at what the world needs and start from that and start to build your career from there, I think you're much more likely to create a purpose-driven life. And maybe you won't earn your maximum lifetime potential that way. And I think that's okay because you're much less likely to experience burnout or a career shift halfway through, like I've done. I think starting with what the world needs is really important, and that's where a gap year can really help you. So if you're someone who feels like you need to find yourself, you need to learn more about the world, what's out there. Sometimes this takes the form of charity work or some kind of social activity. It could just be traveling. It could be it could be anything to expand your worldview and figure out, what are the big needs out there. And maybe it looks like, maybe it's equity, so we need more fairness in the world, or justice, or maybe it's something, more specific that you can relate more easily to things you could be paid for. Maybe it's automation, so we want to get rid of some of the menial tasks that humans have to work on, and that could happen through automation and different types of innovation. So be creative here. Think about where the world's heading, what the world needs, and then you can start to apply your own interests and skills to what the world needs, and you'll have a big head start because you'll be building a fulfilling career. You'll be building a career that makes you want to wake up in the morning, because you're never going to look at what you're doing and say, this just doesn't matter. And most of us will find ourselves at that point in some point in our career where you just say, this career doesn't matter. I'm just doing this for a paycheck. I'm doing this for my family, whatever the motivation becomes. It's not always, I'm doing this because it's good, because the world needs it. I'm doing some kind of social good, but try to do that. Try to be deliberate about it. And even if it's only a portion of your job that you can carve out for what the world needs, that's better than not doing anything at all, right? So one thing, if you're an extreme hobbyist at something, so I've had a lot of different stints as a drummer in my life too. So I played drums for different bands growing up and in Pittsburgh, and I think the drumming became something that I loved and I was good at it. And maybe I could argue that the world needs good music, but unless you're in the top 5%, definitely, probably top 2%, top 1%, top 0.5% of drummers, it's not something you're going to make a career out of. It's not something I was ever going to be paid for. I could probably say the same thing for bowling in my life. Bowling and drumming are like my two hobbies that I invested a lot of time into. And when you're not being paid for it, it's just hard to dedicate the time as you move on in life. If you're working 9 to 5, you'll find yourselves working on your version of drumming from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. or from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And that time's limited, especially if you start introducing family needs into those time windows. So that's why it's really powerful to find something that can hit on all four of these blue areas, and maybe you can get creative with this. So I mentioned that I was good at web design. I'd spent a lot of time computer programming, and I liked the front end of that, right? So I love ideation. I love coming up with new ideas. So maybe if I realized all this early on, I could have done something to build a career out of what I already had. Perhaps I could have been somebody who proposed new software, but I wasn't actually the person seeing it all the way through from soup to nuts, doing the whole application by myself. And I could have found some joy in that. Maybe, and I have some real life examples of this. Maybe I could have taken my profession and applied it to the field that I'm passionate about. So let me give you a quick example there. My friend Eric, he 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 works in social media, and he was an early adopter there. So he ran the Southeastern Conference, the SEC sports social media accounts before social media was really seen as a need for businesses. He started their Twitter account in maybe 2009. So definitely at the forefront of social media. Back then, the website was kind of the portal to everything. But he became very good at social media, and he was passionate about sports. He played baseball in college for a small school in Alabama, and he kind of applied his skills, his trade, his profession of social media marketing to the area where he had passion. So he went on to work. He ran the social media for the Houston Texans, and now he does that for the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference. So he's always done social media in sports. So sports is what he loves. Social media marketing is what he's good at and what he can be paid for. And then in terms of what the world needs, all of his side projects and his pet projects and his passion projects are related to things like social justice or areas where he's passionate. So he's able to pour energy into what he's good at, and he's able to do social good with that. So he's feeling good about, I've found a way to apply my passion. And it's not like, and this is probably more common than having all four things come together at once in a nice tidy ikigai. So you're kind of finding all four of these things in different areas of your life, but you're creating this balance so that you are finding joy every day. You are having passion in your work every day. It might not be all 8 hours of the day or 10 hours or 6 hours, depending on how long you're working, but you've definitely carved out a life where a pretty sizable portion of what you're doing is doing some good for the world. You're getting paid for it. You're building the skills over time, so it's something you're good at, and you're tapping into things you love, whether it's through the activity itself or maybe it's through the domain, like Eric in sports. So you found some way to at least be considerate of all four of these areas in your life and career. So I think that it's probably easiest for us to find our passion, to find our profession. I'm talking about the green areas here. And for your profession, building your profession around your strengths is very important. So once you've decided, I want to be a chemical engineer, I want to be a mathematician, I want to be a history teacher, whatever it is that you've chosen as your profession, if you start to tilt the balance of your job toward your strengths, you'll find that some of the areas of the Icky Guy model will come naturally to you. And what I mean by that is that we all have these talents, these inherent talents, those things I mentioned, journaling, things that bring you energy. And what we need to do is invest time in developing those talents so that they become strengths. So when you're at work, when you're at the university, when you're at school, at college, you're gaining knowledge, you're building skills, and you're practicing so that your talents become strengths, meaning that there are activities I can do very consistently, nearly perfectly after enough time has been put into them. And they also leave me feeling joy. They leave me feeling energized. And maybe that's not written into your job description from day one, but I think maybe one of the greatest tricks that we can do as a worker is to rewrite our own job description without really telling anybody that we're doing that. So if you go into work and you find that it's unsatisfying for you, or that you're not making any progress toward ikigai, you can really start to volunteer yourself for projects that, hey, I think that actually fits better with what I'm interested in and with my strengths. And naturally, you're going to be better at those tasks, and people are going to notice. So, so maybe you're a mathematician, but you're more active in organizing and running committees or something like that, something that really brings you passion because you like to build relationships and develop relationships. Well, people are going to notice that you're great at that, and eventually they're going to lean on you to do those activities, taking you away from the daily minutia, the things that you really don't enjoy. So be very conscious and deliberate about finding ways to tilt the balance of your work toward your strengths, toward your natural talents. And I think that, so I mentioned that if you're considering a gap year, you might be focused on what the world needs, and to an extent also what you love. So you're working on your mission there. You're trying to find yourself, figure out, what can I do to make a greater contribution to this world? The worst gap year is I'm taking a year off and not really doing anything. I'm sitting at home, lost in my thoughts, and maybe through meditation, something like that, you can make progress on ikigai. But I'd say set some goals for yourself during that gap year. Create something quantifiable that you can share with a recruiter after that gap year to say, hey, this is what I've done with my life in this year, and it was meaningful and it was helpful, and it's going to make me better in my profession because of it. If you're deciding to go to grad school, depending on your personal goals, you could be touching on different areas here. So one might be that you're really trying to bolster what you're good at. And it could be that you're trying to bolster this connection between what you're good at and what you love. And I'll give you an example there. So if I went to if I went to school and decided that my undergraduate degree was going to be in economics or psychology, then maybe after 4 years, I don't quite have the training that I need to be good at the things I can be paid for to be satisfied, right? So I need to go back and I need to get even better. I need to really boost this area on the far left of the slide of what I'm good at. And it could be that maybe my master's degree is not going to be in economics or psychology. Maybe it's marketing, which is my field, something that is an application of those underlying skills I developed in undergrad. So through that, maybe I can find my passion. So some area of marketing that I love, and I'm also building up my technical skills, the frameworks that I know in grad school, and through that I can find my passion. So maybe it's content marketing, right? Something that a lot of companies, every company really is paying for in some form or fashion. Maybe it's video marketing, right? I love to make videos. So that's what I'm going to do professionally. And I'm going to get good at that during grad school. So I just have goals. What do you want to come out of grad school with? And often it's useful to take that last step, entering the workforce first. So, and I kind of did this in a strange way where I entered the workforce. I took some time off, like a gap year. It was like a gap half year, and then I entered grad school. Right. So this doesn't all have to be really neat and linear. You'll figure things out as you go, but be mindful of it along the way, and you'll save yourself a lot of grief. So if you're entering the professional world out of school, maybe you're an engineer and you're already competent enough to get in there, get a good job and get paid for it. Maybe I have a pressing need to earn money now, right? That's very realistic. I need to get paid for what I've learned. I have loans that I've accumulated. I have family now, whatever it is, you need to get paid. That's a perfectly reasonable path for you to take, is to get in there and get into the profession. And you really should be applying some decision calculus too to these decisions. How much opportunity cost is there for going to grad school? So not only am I paying for grad school now, but I'm also not being paid to work. And I think sometimes we'll leave these, and when you step back, it might be obvious, but we'll leave these things out of the equation. We'll leave them out of the decision. So don't just decide to do what's easiest, what's most convenient, what some of your mentors are pushing you toward. Step back, look at this whole model and find the gaps. So maybe you already know in your vocation, the last green leaf there that we haven't talked about, this is more your calling. So what types of jobs or professions can you be paid for that they just come naturally to you? And I think sometimes with vocation, with that word, we think about missionaries or the priesthood, something like that, but it doesn't have to be. It could just be that, naturally you have mechanical skill. And of course, you're going to have to get good at that with formal training at some point, but you just pick things up faster. And I think this is why I became so involved in programming, is that once I had that base level of skill, it was really easy for me to adapt and learn other languages because it came naturally to me. But if you're able to create this ikigai where the things that you're naturally good at, the things that you're trained in, and the things you can be paid for intersect with your passions, things you love. And I look at Cleo now and all of the important consultant work that he's doing for organizations that are making a difference in the world. That's how you build a satisfying life. That's how you build a legacy that you can be proud of. And I think the biggest gap I see in society is that we just wait far too long to think about these things. So we're forced to work on ikigai in retirement, or we're forced to work on ikigai late career. But really, the power is where you sit right now. I'm in college, I'm graduating high school, wherever you are in your career, embrace this now. Really, I encourage you to print this out. And if you just search for ikigai on Google, you'll get a bunch of these in different colors, and you'll be able to fill it in yourself. So I would make lists. Make a list of what you love. Make a list of what you're good at. make a list of what the world needs, make a list of professions, jobs you can be paid for, and then step back, take that 10,000-foot view and think to yourself, how does this all fit together? And that's a difficult puzzle. And sometimes you'll need to create, Cleo talks about this, your personal board of directors in your life to help you figure out, how am I going to fit these pieces together? But just being intentional about it is going to give you a leg up on a lot of people in terms of the happiness they're able to build over time. And when you look at research and data about happiness, it doesn't say you need to have this size house to be happy. You need to have a $200,000 a year salary to be happy. I think the median salary for the people who were happiest was something like $70,000. So try to get out of this conventional way of thinking about your career and shift more toward this Icky Guy model. And I think that can be a very rewarding path for you. So I know that this is a lot of information to process because there are a lot of different areas of this model. So I think that now what I'll do is open it up to some questions in the chat, or if you want to, I don't know if you need to request to be unmuted, however that's going to work, but I'd be happy to answer some questions you have now. And also I'm available to you as a resource beyond this presentation, beyond this we're just scratching the surface really of what Icky Guy could mean for you. So feel free to follow me. You can go to my website, scottwdavis.com, and contact me there. I'll be very responsive to whatever questions you have, but I think we have 10 to 15 minutes remaining in this particular session. So I invite you to ask any questions that you have.
Yeah, guys, this is Stacy. So certainly feel free to use the chat. We'll make sure that your question gets answered. If you want to unmute yourself and ask the question in audio, you're absolutely willing to do that. But if there's any questions that you have, let's go get those in the chat right now. Something that I thought was really interesting, Scott, with what you were talking about is, finding that passion at work, making sure that you feel really fulfilled, which I think is the key to a long professional life, right? Sometimes students get locked in the idea of like, well, I can't see myself doing that job for 50 years. And I always like to say, well, I think that's pretty depressing to think about doing the same exact thing for 50 years. So I think the other really cool thing that our young professionals have an opportunity to do with employers these days is something called job crafting. And so, being able to go to your employer and saying, hey, I have a real strength for numbers, or I have a real strength for talking to people. How can I use my strengths to help you in this position? And so I think from an advocacy standpoint, that's something that that young professionals can be looking at more and more today as well.
Absolutely. And the world is changing. So I think, and there are some trade-offs to that. So we've moved away from this kind of pension style career that we think about from the past, where you do work for the same company for 30 or 40 years and build this pension. Now we have transferable retirement, and we're much more mobile as a workforce, which gives us opportunities. But to your point, I think the best careers are ones that evolve. And maybe even, putting myself back in my shoes as a software engineer, I think my thinking was limited too, based on what my daily tasks were. And I may have been able to build a really nice career in that field if I thought in a more evolutionary way. How can I grow this career in a different direction so that I'm not working on the tasks I don't like or that don't energize me? That's not to say you're never going to work on things that you don't like. That's just not realistic. The idea here is, trying to, like I said earlier, tip that balance toward the things you do enjoy and that play to your strengths. And it's a lot more rewarding. And I think we have more flexibility in our careers now, so take advantage of that. Don't be afraid to. And it's not just about taking new opportunities. It's also about turning down opportunities that you're not comfortable with. So I think there's a lot of power in saying, I don't want a management job right now. I'm happy. I'm crafting this career in a direction that I want to move. But I don't find any joy in managing other people. That's fine. Everyone's different. Everyone has a different personality. And the most powerful thing that you can do right now at this stage in your life is to get to know yourself better. And maybe that sounds a little bit cliched or something like that, but I don't think many people put in the time to know themselves. So know what your talents are, know what your strengths are, know what your list looks like for these blue areas of the Icky Guy model. And I think you'll be much better off than if you'd never considered it.
Awesome. Awesome. Scott, we do have some questions coming in the chat. First question is, what are some things to consider when choosing a graduate school?
Good. So there are a number of different ways that you can approach this in terms of choosing a grad school. Of course, you're going to be looking at, if you have an idea about what your specialty is going to be, if it's going to be an MBA or a master's of economics, mathematics, whatever it is that you're interested in, you're going to look at the credentials of those schools. I would be very upfront about looking at what their job placements look like post grad school. So you want to know what's happening to these graduates when they enter the working world after grad school. So that's something you'll want to look at. I would take a look at all the professors teaching in that program, look at their research streams and see if the topics there resonate with you. Look at any publicly available ratings for the programs, for the professors. Just be a learner, be a lifelong learner, learn everything that you can about the grad school. Of course, other very important considerations are going to be cost. And with cost, I would look at the value overall. So sometimes you get a lot of value out of schools that cost a lot, right? So it's not necessarily a bad decision to pay more for grad school, but be aware of that value. So how much more valuable are you going to be in the workforce, or how much happier are you going to be in your job after completing grad school? So be very value focused. And another component to this too is be realistic. So is this going to be a grad school where you're going to be working while you attend school? That's going to make a difference, because some programs you really have to dedicate yourself full time to immerse yourself and to be successful. So if it's part-time, that will change your decision calculus. Think about the geography. For me, I was living in Pittsburgh when I decided to go to grad school. There were a lot of great grad schools in that area. I looked really hard at Carnegie Mellon as a potential option for me. But my family was all migrating to Texas. So my brother moved down here and had 2 children. And then my parents wanted to follow suit and live close to their grandchildren. And I was trying to think about my life overall and what would make me happiest. And it wasn't, being isolated from family in Pittsburgh anymore. It was moving back to Texas, going to grad school and being able to visit with my family every weekend. So everyone's situation is different. I would just ask you not to make your decision based on one criterion. So consider all of the things that are important in your life and relevant to you personally, and gather as much data as you can. Talk to people on LinkedIn who've graduated from these programs. Ask them what they liked the best about it. What was the most challenging aspect? And you'll find out, hey, that's not the right workload for me to balance my job and grad school. Just collect, and Cleo, I know, is an advocate of this too. Get as much good data as you can. I think Cleo always says it's better to be directionally correct than precisely wrong. And that's what you can do. You can get enough data so that you feel pretty good about the decision you've made in choosing grad school, and talk to people. I think that we'll use Google searches and make our decision based on only that. Talk to people, talk to professors, talk to people who've graduated from these programs, talk to hiring managers who've hired people from these schools if you have access to them. Just learn as much as you can before making the decision.
Awesome. Another question in the chat, Scott. Do you have any thoughts with the somewhat limited jobs there are right now due to COVID-19? Do you think one should limit options for the short term, or just create a need for more creativity while looking for a position?
Okay, that's a great question. And I think that when I mentioned at the top that it's times of uncertainty, because there's more uncertainty, and it's kind of unprecedented for my generation, at least, to have this much uncertainty as far as what career paths you can take. I do think you can find opportunity in crisis, and with a tough economy, with a limited number of jobs, there are several different things that could happen. So one is that if you're not able to find a job that you think is going to be satisfying and you have the financial ability to do it, it might be more attractive to take a gap year now than it's ever been before. The problem with that though is that traveling becomes a much different proposition. So the what that gap year looks like, I think you'd have to consider as well. It might not be backpacking in the Himalayas or whatever you might have done in your gap year previously. Although that does seem a little bit socially isolated, the travel would be a challenge. So think about what that would look like. I do think grad school is becoming more attractive in some ways because of the crisis and less attractive in other ways. So I actually think now there's more of a push toward less expensive distance learning. So more emphasis, excuse me, on self-teaching. So it could be that you're spending a lot of time getting good at something that school didn't quite teach you. And it's not necessarily the fault of the school, but let's say you were a graphic artist or graphic designer, but your passion's really video and your program didn't get into that. Well, this is a great time to pick up certifications and take distance learning courses on motion graphics or video or whatever it is, so that you can start to focus your career more than what a typical undergraduate degree prepares you for. But the reality is that the jobs are limited, so you might have to make some concessions early in your career that your predecessors didn't have to make. I did this to an extent. Part of it was my own laziness. I waited a little bit too long to look for jobs out of school. And I ended up falling back on computer programming, which was not what I spent the last 3 years of my college career working on. So I took a job I think my first job was $30,000 a year in my first post collegiate job. It was around $30,000 a year, maybe $35,000 a year in 2003, which wasn't great, right? It wasn't the ideal entry point for me. But it was what was available, right? The economy was decent, but it wasn't booming when I graduated. But I should have had a plan. So I was working for a cool organization. I was writing software for NASA Langley Air Force Base. I needed a plan. Instead, I was thinking, I'm in this job. I'm just going to work it day to day without a plan. And my coworkers actually opened my eyes to this. I was working alongside people who had just been there for decades with no advancement, no additional fulfillment in their lives. And I was thinking, gosh, I need to figure out how to not do that. So if you do give up something to take that first job just because there's limited availability and you need to get paid, there's no shame in that at all. But I would say just have a plan, and you might be surprised by the opportunities that emerge from taking a job that pays a little less or maybe doesn't utilize all the skills that you've built up and what you're good at. That's okay. Just work on this, work on Icky Guy, have a plan so that while you're working in that first job, how am I going to shift this more toward my passion, or how am I going to shift this more toward my mission, and just collect whatever you can, learn whatever you can from that experience, and try to grow from it instead of just counting off the days on the calendar. So I kind of strayed there, but don't avoid the reality and just say there's no jobs, so I'm just gonna search for jobs occasionally but not really make any progress. Build time into your day while you're conducting a job search to get better at something you love, or to get better at something you can get paid for.
Totally agree, Scott. And I think, the other important thing was when you're searching for work in a pandemic kind of environment like this is to be really open to opportunities, right? So there might not be like your dream job might not be there, but taking a job in the interim while you continue to look can help you build your skills. And like we talked about previously with the job crafting, you might even be able to kind of work that job into what your dream job is. So excellent advice to always kind of stay open with that. Last question in the chat is, love the idea of creating lists and assessments. Any other exercises to help with that?
Oh, interesting. So I think we're in the information age now, so there are unlimited number of tools that can help you make lists and take assessments. In terms of assessments. So in addition to Clifton Strengths Finder, there are so many available. Another one that I like is the Berkman personality assessment. Of course, there's Myers Briggs, and just a ton of assessments that you can take. As far as exercises that can help you with what we're talking about today, with making this decision with Icky Guy, I talked to my friend Joey Korenman, who he founded something called the School of Motion. I mentioned motion design earlier in graphics, which is again something I love, but I'm not very good at. So I have a lot of these. I'm an ideator. I have a lot of things I love that I'm not quite good at yet. Joey's advice to me is something that's really stuck with me ever since I had this conversation with him. I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago, and I return to it often. He talked about your perfect day exercise. So what he said was, and he was running a very successful agency in Boston, but it was a busy, difficult life. So really just how much money can I earn? And I think a lot of people now take this approach. Earn all the money you can while you can and do the things you love and you're passionate about later. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but you certainly have a risk of burning out along the way. And that's what happened to Joey. He burned out on running an agency. So he went back and started to teach graphic design, motion design in Florida. And the way he arrived at doing that was through this perfect day exercise. And it's really a visualization exercise. Do it someday that you have time to sit alone in a dark room and just get lost in your thoughts. The idea is that, and it's kind of meditative, it's what does your perfect day look like 5 years from now? And I think 5 years is a pretty good time window, especially for you if you're about to graduate or if you're in the middle of your collegiate career. Just close your eyes and spend 10, 20 minutes thinking about what your perfect day looks like. Where are you? Right? Where are you geographically? Who are you with? What are you doing? And Joey's very good with words, and he described his perfect day saying, he was waking up in the morning, and he's married with one child, and he was saying he has time to have breakfast with his family and cook breakfast together. So not rushing out the door at 6 a.m. to get to work. That was part of his perfect day. Then he wants to ride a bicycle to work. Right? He wanted to introduce more physical activity into his life, so he's riding a bicycle and he's teaching, right? That was a big part of his perfect day. He wanted to be teaching other people. That was his favorite part of the job. When they were onboarding people at his agency, he liked showing them the ropes and kind of teaching them how everything worked and showing them how to hone their craft in graphic design. It was a very small part of his job. So he wanted to make that most of his job. So what does your perfect day look like? And be very specific. What are the smells in the air? I think the more vivid you can be, the more likely it is to stick in your mind and stick in your subconscious, and write it down when you're done. So don't write it down while you're doing it, because I think that will detract from the exercise, but write it down when you're done and say, this is what my perfect day looks like in 5 years. What's one thing I can do today or tomorrow to start working toward that perfect day? And it might not be that you get, pinpointed exactly. And Joey kind of did. So he was lucky in that sense. But he gave up a lot to be able to start living that perfect day. And it's something that evolves. So you have to keep doing it. Where do I want to be 5 years from today? You could do 1 year if that seems too challenging. But I think it could be really illustrative about what you really want versus what you're told you want. And in this modern age, and I'm lost in this too, of social media updates every 3 seconds, more than that, and just getting lost in the feeds and the daily news and the daily distractions. Being able to set aside 20 minutes to clear your head and be purposeful and to think about where you want to be in the future is very powerful. So that perfect day exercise is something I would strongly recommend. I talked to Cleo a lot about doing a personal SWOT analysis. So list out your personal strengths, your weaknesses, and then externally, what are the opportunities that are out there in the world? What are the threats that are out there in your world? And then again, like Icky Guy, try to get the big picture on that. How do I apply my strengths to the opportunities that are out there? How do I convert my weaknesses into strengths? so that I can exploit opportunities that are out there in the world. So those are just two things that come to mind.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. I think we've reached the end of our time today, but certainly want to thank you for all the insights that you've been able to provide. In the chat, we do have, if you have a couple of short minutes, there's a survey that you can complete. Will just kind of help us as we kind of move forward. Cleo, do you have any closing remarks that you want to share with the group?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. First of all, I want to thank Scott on behalf of Morningside College and the Franklin Leadership Foundation. Scott, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. You know, just a real quick quote. It talks about if you keep waiting for the right time, it may never happen. Sometimes you have to make the most of the time that you have to make it happen. And I personally conscribe and utilize Icky Guy. This construct is amazing. There's also a quote I want to share with you that I have, and it says, to receive consideration, one must first give consideration. Applying Icky Guy and utilizing the concepts that Scott just talked about, I think is really about giving consideration to the things that matters most to you. We live in a great time of uncertainty, doubt, and fear, but chaos always breeds opportunity for the brave. So I would say be fearless, be brave. The reason why you're here is because you're seeking additional knowledge. And this Icky Guy model, I feel, is a quasi-decision tree construct that you can easily overlay your pursuits in life, your decisions and opportunity to really ensure that there's great alignment with your passion, your vocation, your mission and profession, as well as linking things to your values and your priorities and your relationships. So Scott's right. I do have a quote, better to be directionally correct and precisely wrong. And I think this will steer you in the right direction to make sure that whenever you're doing whatever decisions you're making, you at least have a construct or a process to make a good decision. So thank you so much from me and, of course, the Morningside Foundation, as well as Alex and Stacy and Carly and Carrie and the rest of the team.
Wonderful. I echo those thanks to everyone at Morningside College, everyone on the team. I want to thank everyone who participated here live and also everyone who's watching this on a recording. And of course, thank you, Cleo, for everything you've done for me and all the joy you've brought to my life. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you as well, Scott. Thank you. And I'll hand it back over to Stacy and team.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. This is just the first in the series. So next week's series, same time, same place, is going to be on the entrepreneurial mindset. That's not only entrepreneurial as a career, but also in your life and your work. So if you're free, we would love for you to join us. Another quick reminder, if you're able to fill out that survey, please do so. Other than that, you guys are good to go. I hope that you enjoy this beautiful afternoon and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.